Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 8th episode of the Talking Cardboard Late Night Podcast. My name is Nick from Talking Cardboard, a group of guys that love to talk about board games and sometimes actually play them. If you're listening to this episode as a podcast, please note we also have a YouTube video of the podcast on our Talking Cardboard YouTube channel, so you can check that out, which will include our faces as well as other visual content of the games that we will be discussing. This is a special episode where we will break away from our regular format because we have some special guests on the episode with us, who are Mark and Sobhi from the Gaming Moguls Podcast. I will introduce them to you shortly. But first, I just want to apologize for the long delay between episodes. I know the episode 7 was, I think, several months ago. I don't want to know the exact number of months. And I am not putting the blame on my daughter, but if you have been listening to the previous episodes, you'll know that I recently had my first child. I'm still learning how to manage my time. Again, not her fault. It's my fault for not being better with my time management, and I can't complain because Sobhi in the episode here with us today has 5 children, and he's still able to manage his time fine. So I just have to, I think, learn from Sobhi how to better prioritize everything, so I'm not waiting 6 months between podcast episodes. So with that said, I'll segue into introducing our special guests of honor who are graciously providing us with their time tonight, starting with Mark from the Gaming Moguls. So Mark, why don't you provide a little bit of a board gaming background of yourself, what kind of got you into the hobby, what kind of board games you enjoy playing, and then you can pass it off to Sobhi.
Sounds great. And Nick, just if it makes you feel any better, it actually gets worse as they hit high school. So then you're driving them back and forth to school 4 times a day. And
I'm not listening. I'm not listening.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, boom, you become empty nesters like that. So, hey, everybody, Mark Teskey. I am the founder and co-host of the Gaming Moguls. I actually have 2 high school age kids that are my frequent gaming companions. We do a lot of family gaming, but not the family gaming you probably think of, unless your family happens to like playing heavy Euro games and pretty meaty games and so forth. So I've been running the Gaming Moguls since approximately 2017, 2018. 2017, I think, is when Jake Klopfenstein and I kicked it off. And we managed to keep it alive and kind of on life support throughout COVID, and brought Sobhi on immediately after COVID. And, we're kind of going through a bit of a renaissance and relaunch ourselves right now. And it's been a lot of fun to get back into it. As a bit of a gaming background, I'm mainly a Euro gamer. That's what my group likes to play a lot, and that's what most of my closets have. I like, I've got probably 15 games from Uwe Rosenberg. I've got a pile of Alexander Suhi games. And I think pretty much. I also like collecting small box Japanese games, and I also like collecting train games. So those are sort of my first loves on that one. Not much of a war gamer, not much of a social deduction person, not much of a cooperative person. So kind of as long as we're not in one of those zones, I probably like to play it. So Great. Thanks for having us on tonight. I'm looking forward to this.
Thanks, Mark. How about you, Sobhi?
Yeah, so first I just want to say, Nick, that you doing this podcast right now, this is a true testament to your dedication, even with a young child. So kudos to you. It's really, really hard to be, having a young child and doing anything at all. I mean, I want to say, what are the stats here? Probably, I'm going to make this up. I'm going to say 80% of people quit the hobby completely when they have their first kid. It's like a death knell for getting together with the buds, So anyway, applause everyone for Nick to, he's got this dark grotto that he's in, and baby's sleeping, so be quiet.
I know, exactly.
Anyway, I'm Sobhi Youssef, and I am the co-host of the Gaming Moguls. So I joined Mark here, I want to say almost a year ago, Mark, if I'm correct. And right yeah. Mark and I were in a game group together locally, and we've bought and traded each other's games locally, probably the same game multiple times in a row. And then Mark was like, "Hey, you like similar games? You should come." And I did, and we ended up talking about games a lot. And Mark invited me to the podcast. So thanks, Mark. It's been a blast, and good time. Talking about games and playing them. And I like to think that we play games most of the time, Nick. So I know you said some of the time, but I really enjoy getting stuff to the table. So that said, my local background here is I've done a lot of organizing for the First Minnesota Historical Board Gaming Society, which is a very old club that dates back into I want to say, 1970s, here local to Minnesota. And lots of war games that, Mark said he doesn't play a lot of war games, but that really war games and historical board gaming really called out to me early on in my gaming journey. So, but that said, Mark and I kind of bonded over playing mid and heavy Euros, and we still play a lot of those. While Mark might not see eye to eye with me on many of the war games and other economic games that I really enjoy, we really share a lot of interests with respect to heavier games. So, anyway, we always have a lot to talk about. So war games, historical games, heavy Euros, econ, trains. I love trains. And then, of course, like tons of games with the kids.
Great. Well, I don't think I even mentioned yet that I was introduced to Sobhi through the First Minnesota Board Game Group. That's how I think Sobhi and I originally met, and a few years ago, right before COVID, I think. And then Sobhi was how I got connected then to Mark and the Gaming Moguls podcast. So want to mention that. And it just so happened Jake Klopfenstein and myself went to middle school and high school together. So that was a connection that came out of nowhere as well. And he invited me to I still remember his dodgeball birthday party in 6th grade. And who knew, we didn't know it at the time that we were going to be huge board gamers growing up, but it's just funny how things work. So with that said, let's get into more about this Moguls Con. And this was an event that was, again, new to me only a few months ago. Sobhi mentioned that he and Mark were organizing this convention, and we're based here in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. There's really not a ton of large organized board game annual events. We have Con of the North, which I have a shirt on, but other than Con of the North, there's not really a board game convention that's being held regularly. And I was really excited that the First Minnesota was doing their own convention or of sorts every year, but that one was a little bit of a drive, and I know that was maybe more intentional to make it more of a getaway, but Moguls Con was located right here in the metro area, and it immediately sold out. So hoping you guys want to expand it further in the future. We'll maybe touch on that later. But what we thought we'd talk about in this episode is the games that all of us ended up getting a chance to play at Moguls Con. You already heard that Mark and Sobhi talk about their interest. If you guys are familiar with me, I'm more on the Ameritrash side of the spectrum and wargaming. So I think we all bring a little bit of a different niche of interest in terms of games we like to play. And that will be, I think, evident in the games that we'll talk about here shortly. Before we get to that, one other thing I did want to mention was that we did also have some generous sponsors to Moguls Con. So I want to give them, again, another round of thanks. We, of course, thank them during the convention, but I want to give them some more praise, and that includes Leader Games for graciously providing some donations as raffle prizes, Moon Crab Games, who provided a copy of their latest game, Leviathan Wild, which is now also there's going to be a new Kickstarter for that. That's a really cool cooperative boss battler game. And then our local game stores, including The Source Comics and Games and Red 6 Games, were providing retail copies of games. So that was really awesome and really helped make the experience that much more exciting for all the attendees. No one really understood that basically by coming to this convention they would be able to walk away with the game. So really want to give a shout out to those guys, and definitely check out all those companies. They're all great companies. And then also I'll talk about this game shortly, but the designer of a game called Factions Battleground showed up to the convention to demo his game, and that was really cool that he donated his time to do that. So with that said, let's finally talk about some board games that we played at Moguls Con. And to get things started, we'll let the guests go first. So, Mark, how about you take it away?
Sure. And you mentioned Factions Battlegrounds. Peter was really a boss there that weekend. Not only did he come and demo all weekend, he also provided not one but two different copies of Factions Battleground, one for Friday night and one for Saturday night. So huge thanks to him. Also, we can't forget the Trax crew, because the Trax gang also donated a copy of 18 India plus a complete set of their mainline magazine, which is kind of like a sort of a mini game magazine with a bunch of small train and economic and cube rail games built into it. So and Mike Carter was here personally giving demos of new games he's got coming up and so forth. So just again, can't thank all the sponsors enough for everything that they did to really promote and help us make it a super memorable and occasion for the weekend. So
yeah, absolutely. This is such a high value event, I think, for the community, and the community really appreciated it. I think just the degree of sincere thanks, across the board, it was really heartwarming, and I really appreciated seeing everyone play games and enjoy them, and not a single person in the room was sitting around twiddling their thumbs for too long. And I like to think we did a good job hosting, Mark, but also it's just a testament to how awesome the community is here in Minneapolis.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and really before I get into my game selection here, and we have lots of games to talk about, the whole idea behind Moguls Con is that I really wanted it to be a game party. If you contrast it with Con of the North, you've got, which is a great convention. It's all about signing up for games and going into a room and playing that game at a specific time. Whereas I found myself so often every time I go to the Con of the North, sitting in the lobby, playing with friends and meeting up with friends in the lobby and so forth. And I kind of realized, I'm like, wow, that's a cool experience too. So I wanted to replicate that and make it sort of just a big open gaming party for all of my gaming friends and, members of the community and new friends and so forth, where we all bring our games and we all, hey, you should try this. This is great. Oh yeah, well, let's try this. This is great. And so that everybody walks away having met new people and having tried a bunch of stuff they haven't had before and having a bunch of new favorite games. So that's really the sort of the modus operandi of Moguls Con going forward. Don't know that we're ever going to have much of a schedule per se. I mean, people are always free to schedule events that they want to. But, as an event, really, it's trying to be a little more organic than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So, all right. Well, jumping right into it, why don't we start off? I'm going to start off a little bit with, actually, since I was just talking about Mike Carter and the Trax crew, I got a chance to play their new prototype, League of Steam. League of Steam, I guess that's kind of an operational title still that I believe they're looking at self-publishing. It's an 18xx game, meaning that it's very economic and lots of route building. Mike himself, I think a lot of the games he designs are very operational in nature. In fact, I think he said this is almost surgically designed to put fingers in the eyes of the grognards, I think is what he specifically said. Grognards are the words used for the crusty old train gamers that have to have certain colors on the board and have to have things done a certain way and played correctly and all of that. What's different about this one? Well, first off, there's no auction. You basically have a couple of companies. You get randomly dealt out and you pick a stack of companies and you buy them. Super simple. You're off and running. Do you have trains? Yep, you have trains, but you also have ships and shipping lines, and you also have airships, and you've got underground mining companies, and of course airships can't go to mining companies because underground, duh. And the idea is that you get these miners and privates that are scattered around. Some might be an airship company, some might be a mining company, and you can only make a major by joining those together. And that's how you form a major company and expand your route out. And then you get huge bonuses if you go multimodal, meaning that you make a run that includes all of those routes from all of those different types of, planes, trains, and automobiles, I guess. Super fun. I think, it's something they're still year or two out on development on before having ready to go, but looked very polished and complete. We had a very good time playing it, and if you're somebody that wants to play trains on a big scale, definitely check out League of Steam when it's available. It was a really good time to play.
Yeah, that description, Mark, really reminds me of the video game franchise Final Fantasy and a lot of the like steampunk aesthetic and so on. You should tell Mike to throw in like an adventuring party that goes around the map and
Oh,
does weird
oh no, no.
stuff.
I actually commented it reminds me a lot of the Sleeping Gods world,
Ah,
from Red
okay.
Raven Games, where it's
Yeah,
a steamship that's adventuring around a kind of mystical world and so forth. That
yeah.
I actually brought my copy of Sleeping Gods the next day to show them how close of a tie-in there probably is. So, yeah, and because of the fact it's sort of designed to be a bigger tent and getting more people involved with it, and maybe not quite such a threatening theme, you know, uh, throwing in encounters or something like that might be something they'll look into in the future.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, maybe he could even talk to Ryan Lockett to see if he can help with art, you know? Anyway,
Art or theming or putting it in that world or
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's
totally.
very much all of those things, and it was just cool experience. And I think safe to say that there are some 18xxers that'll absolutely love it and some that'll absolutely hate it, and I don't think there's going to be much middle ground.
Yeah. Yeah, there'll be a mix of both. Excellent. Well, I'll join the train gang here, and I'm gonna talk about a game now that I loved so much and it was so nice that I played it twice. This is 1894 by Jan Klos, and currently it's self-published. I talked about this before, before the convention as a game that I was excited to play, and thankfully I did table it. So, that's one I think on my list here that I tabled. So, but 1894 is a wild 18xx experience. It's derived from 1830, and it includes some interesting mechanisms that diverge from 1830. It's got a very aggressive train rusting schedule with a pretty rapidly accelerating train roster. The key part of this game, and I probably mentioned this previously as well, is that when you upgrade a green double city, so that's just a city, two cities next to each other, it diverges into a double O brown city, which really just adds a pretty wild operationally like aggressive mechanism to the game. And everyone that I've played with has really adored that. So excellent work, Jan, on this, and I'm really excited to see the production copy eventually. Hopefully, someone picks it up very soon and publishes this thing because it is probably top 5 18xx for me right now.
Yeah.
Nick, do your listeners know about 18xx and know what it is? Did we kind of skip the lead on that one?
Yeah, so I was literally going to say, for those of our listeners who don't know what 18xx is, I personally would suggest checking out. I'll do some cross promotion here of the no pun intended YouTube to detail as to does a very good job of pretty concisely providing. It's a 39-minute video, but it does a good job in my mind of providing an overview of 18xx for someone that has no idea what it is, which was me only a couple weeks ago. But with that said, if you don't want to watch a 39-minute video, I'll let Mark. Do you want to kind of give as a condensed explanation of what you find an 18xx game to be?
Yeah, for sure. And also, another person is she's actually a member of the Dice Tower crew. Ambi Valdez has done a lot of really great intro to 18xx videos too that are, pretty basic and easy to follow along. We've actually had Ambi as a guest on the Gaming Moguls in the past, and she's really a great source of knowledge for that. So, in short, 18xx is really an economic-based game. Economic just simply means that instead of keeping score on a scoreboard, you're keeping track with money, and the person with the most money at the end of the game wins. And the way that you make money is that you start companies, and those companies have shares of stock. And those shares of stock both gain in value over the course of the game, and they pay out dividends during the game. And so you buy these shares of stock, and then you start developing your railway company. You lay track down, and then you run routes on your trains in order to pay you dividends by how many shares you have. And then you use that money that you make to reinvest in new companies and new shares. That's really probably the grossest oversimplification of it. In reality, it's actually a viciously competitive, very sharp elbowy type of game where, you can stick somebody with a hopeless company that torpedoes them into bankruptcy. You can take their burgeoning little hopeful train company and shoehorn them back into a corner so that they can just make little local milk runs to the grain silo and back, and nothing more interesting than that. Or you can just simply doom them to a lifetime of mediocrity through going off and doing deals with other people. So, if that's your kind of jam, definitely recommend looking at it. But even a short 18xx is still a couple of hours long, all the way up through. I think we probably played League of Steam for 8 hours.
Yeah, this is a game that Mark also, I think, enjoys, is Acquire. So that's obviously a game that is quite popular in the hobby board gaming world. It's been around since the 1960s. If you've ever played the game Acquire, in my mind, 18xx games is like Acquire, but instead of hotels, you're buying stocks and train companies, and then instead of building out hotel chains on a board, you're building out railway tracks for your trains. And then the similarities kind of end there, and the 18xx games get way more complex. But and
if you want to get even closer, pro tip: check out an Alan Moon game called Union Pacific.
Okay.
Field is Yara's winner or nominee back in like the 90s. Okay, it is literally Acquire, but with trains. Now, Alan Moon, as you know, is the designer of Ticket to Ride. And if you look at the board, you look at this thing, and you look at the trains, you're like, that's Ticket to Ride. No, it came out before Ticket to Ride, and it was basically Acquire on a Ticket to Ride board. Then he came out with Ticket to Ride afterwards and made it a big hit. So anyway, it's only published in Germany. The rules are all in German, but there's easy translations available. And if you ever want to play Acquire with trains, look up Union Pacific. I've got a copy if you guys ever want to play sometime. It's super fun.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. So now that everyone that's listening is an expert in what 18xx games are, we'll talk about a game next here that has nothing to do with 18xx, and that's the game Tank Duel. So Tank Duel is a war game from GMT, and it's essentially tank-on-tank combat where you and an opponent are managing a World War II era tank. There's at least 10. There could be 20 tanks that come with the game, each with slightly different performance attributes in terms of their ability to move and their ability to fire, the types of armament they have, how defensible they are. And it's a very streamlined system, compared to wargaming in general. There isn't a 2D map. It's basically just a linear map where all you care about is the linear distance from you and the enemy tanks, and you're either moving your tank closer or farther from the enemy tanks. It can be played 1v1, but it can be played up to 4v4, so you could have a huge tank battle. There's also a cooperative system that comes with the base game, so you can play against an AI opponent. It's a really novel system. It's card driven. There's no dice in the game. There's still luck involved, because for dice checks you're just drawing from a draw deck of cards, and these cards are multifaceted. There's like 5 different pieces of information each card will have on it used for different game purposes. You have different crew effects that can happen. So very a lot going on in this game, and I want to give a special thanks to the gentleman running this game. His name's Paul, and what I really appreciate, again, going back to just having these types of events in general, is you're getting to play a lot of this pays homage maybe more to First Minnesota too. A lot of guys that not only know these board games but know the history behind the board game. So while we're playing the game, Paul was giving a history lesson of the different tanks that we were playing with, which was really interesting and made the game then that much more enjoyable. So and I was playing this with my dad, and my dad's not a huge hobby gamer, so anything above the complexity of like poker starts to be a little complex for him, but he was actually pretty much able to, I think by the end, get a good idea of how this game was supposed to work. And I have a copy in my collection, so hopefully now that he knows how to play and I know how to play, thanks again to Paul for teaching, my dad and I can play my copy of the game. So that was Tank Duel. And also I want to maybe mention that Paul's also working with GMT on this game too. So that was another cool thing about Moguls Con, is you have a lot of people that are actually integrate in the industry, doing things with the industry. And Paul just has a huge passion for this game, and so he's been working on his own content for the game that might actually get printed. So I think that's really excited that's really exciting to me, and cool that I have an experience in playing with someone that is actually going to contribute to this series of games, because in addition to this original box, there's already expansions for different theaters of World War II that provide different tanks. So anyway, that's Tank Duel.
Yeah, Tank Duel is a good game, and just for any war game listeners out there, it's considered like a spiritual successor to the 1980s game Upfront, which again is related to a very popular GMT title, Combat Commander. So yeah, Tank Duel, totally awesome if you are interested in Upfront, Combat Commander, etc. Definitely a great game.
Actually tested a game that sounded very similar to that at Gen Con 2018. Kind of the difference is that you had tanks, you had a crew in the tanks, but like it was all done with poker hands. So like the hit systems was all with a normal deck of cards and dealing poker hands and so forth, and that's how you actually managed on how damage was dealt and so forth. So fascinating. Talking about shooting at things over distances, I actually played a lot of BattleTech in the past, and the crew I used to play it with a lot was a group called Maximum Overdrive. That's they're regulars at Con of the North every year, and they have a room there, and they always set up very overdone dioramas with miniatures and scenery and housing and that whole thing. And they were out in full force at Moguls Con, and I got a chance to play Wild Wild West with them on Saturday morning. So this was a complete tabletop size thing that they had made with a whole Wild West OK Corral downtown, and painted cowboys, and granny with her bloomers and a shotgun, and handmade little dynamites that you could throw. And anyway, ostensibly it was the Hatfields versus the McCoys. I was on the side of good and righteousness, the Hatfields, and essentially it was a head-to-head duel against the McCoys, and it was very much it actually reminded, the system was awfully similar to BattleTech in that it was, you had kind of hit boxes on each of your cowboys where there was damage done. You'd roll to see where he hit you. Oh, he hit you in the arm. You drop your weapon in that case, or you were gut shot, so you can only crawl along and move half your distance or whatever. And you'd pull out your tape measure and bend it around corners and figure out your distance, and then that was the range from your gun, and there was range modifiers and all of that, and off we went. Did grind down to a bit of a stalemate. I mean, pretty much everybody was crawling around gut shot by the end of things, and I still had my long range rifle and was fully mobile, and I think I could have eventually hunted down the rest of those dastardly McCoys before we actually decided to call it. So anyway, production was absolutely amazing. Sobhi, you saw it. Did you guys get a chance to see that one?
Yeah, pretty stellar. Those guys really, bring a lot of joy, I'd say, to what they do, and it was impressive. And actually, my wife later played Horrified with them as well, and she had nothing but like positive things to say. She was like, really amazed at how fun the game was and how much they made the game more fun for her. So,
yeah, they are the nicest guys. I actually went to high school with Steve, so I've known Steve my entire life. And actually, Don got me into gaming, so I can personally testify for what a credit they are to the Twin Cities gaming community.
Yeah, I was going to add that thank you. I mean, it was on your list anyway, Mark, but I really should have mentioned Maximum Overdrive at the top of the episode when I was thanking sponsors, because they also donated their time to be at the Moguls Con. And yeah, I get almost dumbfounded by the amount of passion you see that these individuals are putting into the hobby, because this is like a work of art. Like I would love for them to have everything set up in a museum. I would pay admission to basically go through a gallery of all their different games set up. Like I would literally do that, because that to me, it's art in my opinion. It's board game art, but it's art nonetheless in my mind, because it takes time and dedication, and it's and then that they're willing to share that passion with others is makes it that much more, I think, commendable. So yeah, I'm really glad that they were there.
So I'm going to switch gears to a war game as well. And this is definitely a First Minnesota Club favorite. So I'm talking about Brotherhood and Unity, published by Compass Games and designed by Tomislav Sipchik. Tomislav is from Croatia, and actually one of our members, Alan Carlson, was a historical consultant on this game. So unfortunately, Alan couldn't make it, but Alan loves this game, and hopefully we honored Alan not being there by playing it. I saw it a couple times as well throughout the nights or throughout the weekend. So in Brotherhood and Unity, this is a Paths of Glory style CDG, which is a card-driven war game. So you use cards in your hand that have operation points in order to move troops around in a point-to-point format, trying to fortify positions, capture strategic key areas, which we call keys, and then essentially trying to, beat your opponent using tactics and strategy on the battlefield. So and this is about the 1990s war between Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia at the time in the Balkans. So Alan was actually stationed in Montenegro at the time and will absolutely love to talk to you about it anytime you ever go to a First Minnesota function. So, so yeah, wonderful game. I played with Steve Carter and Patrick Schifano. And we got one of the supply rules wrong, so it was a little weird, but the battle over Sarajevo was absolutely intense. So always a blast.
Awesome. Yeah, I've learned a lot about history from Alan, as well as Sobhi referenced. So with that said, let's keep it going with another historical war game, and that is Fire and Stone, Siege of Vienna. This is a lighter war game that's published by Capstone Games, and I'll say right away that the quality of the components in this game is immediately recognized. They have wooden chits for, unique wooden pieces for a lot of the components. So for the cannons, they're little wooden cannon meeples. And I thought that, and then they have fortifications that are made out of wood as well. It's a really nice touch. The map is small, but also looks very nice. In this game, it's asymmetrical. One side is playing as the invading Ottoman force, and then the other side is the Hungarians, I believe, I'm not a history expert, so defending the capital of. I'm reading off now the game page here. So you're outside the Habsburg capital of Vienna. So what makes this game kind of unique is that there's not, besides the cannons, the wooden cannon pieces, there's no like counters representing your forces that are moving around the map. Instead, it's more abstracted that basically both sides' army men or forces are all over the board, and whenever there's a battle in a hex, each side is drawing from their stack of troop cards. And you have to have at least 3 troop cards that you're using, but those troop cards have values from 1 to 3, and each side has a different set of number of troop cards and different array of values of those troop cards. And in which cards you choose is hidden information. So the higher number wins the battle, and the invading Hungarians are, of course, trying to advance into the capital stronghold. And meanwhile, the defenders are just trying to prevent that from happening. I think you need to survive 5 rounds, and if you prevent the Ottomans from reaching their objective within those 5 rounds, you win the game as a defender. And then there's also another deck of strategy cards that you'll be using to introduce other game effects, and each deck is asymmetric to their faction. So I would say I enjoyed playing this game. I played it with my dad, who, as you probably just heard me say, isn't a huge board gamer, but this game wasn't overly complex, so I think he was able to understand how the game worked relatively quickly. Not sure how much replayability it has, because it seems like a very straightforward kind of puzzle, like in terms of how you would approach the game on either side. There's not a lot of variability from play to play, I could imagine, since the board itself is relatively small and the deck of cards, there's really not a ton of cards that you're playing with. But I do think it's a great lighter war game because there's not really that many out there that can be played within 60 minutes, and I do think this is a game that can probably be played within an hour. So that's Fire and Stone Siege of Vienna.
Cool. I've pretty much exhausted all of my possible war game competition or conversation here, so I am actually going to go back to my sweet spot. We're going to talk a bit about Euro games for a bit here. So I'm actually going to start with the very first game I played on Friday morning after we had the con set in. I kind of got everybody checked in and all the administrivia done. My friend Brian sat me down and said, hey, let's play a game of Lorenzo Il Magnifico. So that is a Euro game from 2016, published by Cranio Creations. And if you're into Euro games, over the past 5 years, there is a group of Italians that have absolutely been killing it with just hit after hit after hit, just a bunch of super strong games. And I think in a lot of ways, Lorenzo was kind of the game that kicked that all off. So, the whole idea is that you're the head of a noble family and you're trying to gain more victory points than everybody else. And it's really about buying cards with dice. And what's kind of nifty about it is there are 4 shared dice that everybody picks from. Different colors. You can use each color of dice once to buy a card out of a category. And depending on if you have more or less pips than that thing costs, you can make up for it with another resource. You can basically send extra workers and still buy it. And there's additional cost if you're not the first person in that row. And the idea is that you're going to use one of every colored dice once, but one of them is always just worth one, and so you're always going to have to pay up for that and so forth. So of course, at the end of every round, you have to have a certain level of contributions to the church, or you get excommunicated and suffer pains for the entire rest of the game. Super fun game. It's currently rated number 114 overall on Board Game Geek, so it's actually a very highly revered game as well. Often available at a pretty good deal. Like, it's been out for a long time, and I've seen some pretty good closeout prices on this game. So, if you do like playing Euro games, definitely check out Lorenzo Il Magnifico by Flamania Brazzini and Virginio Gili and Simone Luciani, published by Cranio Creations. Fantastic game.
All right, Mark. So I had to scour my entire games logged database here to find a Euro game that I played this weekend. So I was definitely afraid that I didn't play a single Euro game all weekend, Mark, but I did, and it was awesome. It was an amazing game, and I think you're going to buy it too, based on talking about it. So this is Sardegna. Published by I think Platy. It's a Korean company, I want to say, and I imported this a few weeks back actually, and I also got a copy of Minnow Dice from Platy as well. It's relatively inexpensive. I found a good deal to get these games imported. This game is actually just a rebranding of a game called Krita from 2005. Same exact game, no new mechanisms, and basically, this game has a swear word for Mark, but a bit of area majority going on. But overall, this is very similar, I'd say, and many listeners here probably know the game Concordia. So essentially, you have a fixed hand of cards. You play cards that allow you to take actions on a board where you're trying to set up economic supply chains in order to build more stuff on the island. So you have, a dose of things that I can do right now to benefit my position and secure strong, plays and points right now versus setting up your engine for the end of the game, which is, the hallmark of a Euro game, obviously. So lots of tension there, and I'd say the competition of the area control is pretty intense as well. So maybe you won't absolutely love it, Mark, but really that engine building engine building aspect of this game is really what sets it apart. It really spoke to me a lot more than Concordia, and it's a very streamlined game. So, and also the production in this box is just beautiful. The whole box is the game.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that was really cool. Well,
Yeah.
I do love Concordia, and Stefan Dora, the designer of that, is a legend in old school Eurogaming. I actually have one of his games from 2001, which happens to be an area control game called Medina, which is, you're kind of trying to build up this beautiful city of Medina with wooden blocks. And, it's a bit like the Climbers where you're trying to outpace somebody and get most of the wall and be the closest to the wells and the markets and stuff like that. And yeah, nothing but respect for the designer and would definitely love to try that.
Yeah, we definitely need to. It's really short too. I think it was like an hour, and it was just like snappy, and there wasn't any significant analysis paralysis. All new players, everyone caught on, everyone loved it. Nothing but positive things to say about it. So, Sardegna by Stefan Dora.
Great, thanks, Sobhi. So the game that I'm going to be talking about is called Vajayanagara. I believe I pronounced that correctly.
Nope.
You're braver than I am.
Well, okay, Sobhi, please correct my pronunciation.
Yes, it's Vajayanagara.
Okay.
And also the designer, one of the designers, Saverio Spagnoli. If I got that wrong, I apologize, but Saverio was gracious enough to put me in the liner notes of this game, so I really apologize if I got it wrong.
Okay, good. I'm glad. So Sobhi's on the hook now, not me for saying this game wrong. Vajayanagara, right?
Yeah.
Vajayanagara.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a coin-inspired game. I'm not sure if it's considered an actual coin game, but regardless, I would call it a coin game because it's by GMT and basically has that coin mechanisms. If you're not familiar with the coin system, it stands for counterinsurgency. Stands for counterinsurgency, and it's a lineup of games from GMT. They've made like 15 of them now, and they focus on typically conflicts in history all over the world that involved counterinsurgents or some sort of just disgruntled group of individuals, typically ones that are being oppressed by some sort of government, and then there's usually multiple factions at play trying to achieve their various objectives, and each historical conflict is different, so what each faction in all the coin games is trying to do is completely asymmetric. In Vajayanagara, same rule applies. There's 3 factions. This is a coin game that's from 1 to 3 players. Oftentimes they're from 1 to 4 players. One being that there is a solo system that comes with the game, but this is for 1 to 3 players, and you're playing the different factions that existed in India during the time period that this game takes place, which is from 1290 through 1398 because that's what it says in the title of the game. I didn't know that by otherwise, but that's what's also nice about these coin games in general is they teach you history lessons. I mean, that's a big part, in my opinion. Like that's almost 50% of the value of a coin game is you're learning a lot of stuff that you may not have otherwise known about an important historical period that being an American, you otherwise aren't going to necessarily learn about. So this time period in India, I had no real background of. Still don't know a lot about, but I know in the game goes through a lot of the aspects of what each faction was trying to do and accomplish. And what was also great about this experience is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire was playing with us, and if you haven't heard of Liz Davidson, she's definitely a well-known figure within the solitaire board gaming community. Definitely check out her content if you're interested in learning more about solitaire board games specifically. But I would call this in my mind, this is the beginner coin game. A lot of people have said that Cuba Libre is kind of a starter coin game, but Vajayanagara has a very low barrier of entry. All the rules, how the rules are portrayed on the cards, how the graphics, everything about the game is very accommodating, more so than other coin games that I've played. So very easy to get into. The game I thought was tense throughout the whole time we were playing, and so it seemed balanced, regardless of which of the 3 factions you were playing. And there was also this 4th AI controlled faction, which was the Mongols, that were going after the Indian government faction every round, and that was kind of a nice little twist that was added to the game to make things a little more exciting. So with all that said, I do recommend Vajayanagara. For me personally, I still think I like the coin game Liberty or Death a little better because that one has more of more of an emphasis on the combat, which I'm a war gamer, so I like combat, and the battles and in Liberty or Death just had a little more meaning, and there was just more depth to the combat resolution in Liberty or Death. But that does come with more complexity, whereas Vajayanagara, there is battles or confrontation, but it's very streamlined, so which makes the game then that much quicker to play. So that's Vajayanagara from GMT.
I was very jealous of that table, by the way. I really wanted to play with you guys, but it is a 3-player game. But it was cool. You had Nick from Talking Cardboard, you had Hector from Dad's on a Map, and then you had Liz from Beyond Solitaire, and of course Leader Games now. So lots of cool people at this table.
Yeah, I didn't know about. I knew Hector mentioned he did videos in the past, but I didn't know that was the name of his group, was Dad's on a Map. You said.
Yeah, he's does the coin collectors group there, and kind of acts as the de facto wargaming expert.
Okay, awesome. So check that out too from Hector. So all right, back to Mark.
Cool. Speaking of Hector, let's have a Hector thread here. I got a chance to play Nusfjord with Hector and another guy named Chris. I just ended up just randomly talking with Hector after I had completed playing. I think I'd finished playing 1890 on Saturday night, and I was just chatting with Hector a little bit and talking about some of our favorite games and whatnot. And somehow we had landed on just hey, let's play something. We had been talking about Nusfjord. Went over and looked at my pile of stuff, pulled 3 or 4 out, and suddenly went, well, duh. We had been talking about Nusfjord. Let's play Nusfjord. So, as a bit of background, Nusfjord is a Uwe Rosenberg game. Most of Uwe's games somehow involve, farming or animal husbandry or subsistence lifestyle in a harsh climate of some sort. And Nusfjord is no different. You're in a Norwegian fishing village, and you're trying to live on going out and getting fish and chopping down wood and building buildings and trying to make the most money out of it. It's actually an economic game. There are shares of stock in it, where you, cash in your shares of stock for gold, and you get more shares of fish. If you have bought other people's shares, they actually have to pay you a share of their fishing catch. And this is actually, Uwe kind of has 2 lengths of games. He has a super long game, this would be like A Feast for Odin or Caverna or Agricola or Hallertau, some of those. And then he also has some shorter games, too, that are about an hour in length, like Glass Road or Nusfjord. And Nusfjord, I think, got slept on a little bit when it first came out. And now that it's completely out of print and hard to get, it's kind of getting its day in the sun right now, where it's getting a new wave of popularity. There's actually a big box being printed of it with all the expansions that are super hard to get coming out in the very near future. And super competitive, super tight game. I taught them how to play it. We knocked it out in a bit over an hour, and I think Hector had purchased a copy by the end of the game, which is always a good testament on you really did like this game, didn't you?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, so this is kind of my, hey, I've got about an hour and change to play a game. I can teach it quick. I'm reasonably competitive on it on a regular basis, and pretty much guarantee the crew I'm playing with it is going to like it if they like Euro games, even a tiny bit. So glad I got a chance to play with them, and glad I got to meet both Chris and Hector. It was a super fun time.
Yeah, the game looks great. I was looking up pictures of it, and definitely a game I could see myself wanting to try. I have Agricola, and I haven't really explored any of the other Uwe Rosenberg games since then. But I always thought Agricola was a cool game, so this is one that I might have to try sometime.
All right, Mark, looks like you got another mission.
Yeah, and I will say that, Agricola is notoriously punishing, right? I mean, you spend 3/4 of the game just trying to stay alive. This one's quite a bit more freewheeling. Everything you do kind of feels good. There's always something fun to do. I got cool buildings I can make. I'm going out and getting some fish. Gonna buy some more boats. There's always fun stuff to do in it. But it's tight, and you're not gonna win unless you don't put a foot out of place. It just isn't quite so punishing along the way. So I can about guarantee you like it.
Yeah, there's a reason why Rosenberg is probably one of the most lauded designers of our time, and It's because he could just consistently just hammer out hit after hit and in this heavy space. So
Yeah, his weak games are better than many other designers' lifetime achievements.
yeah, absolutely. All right, so I no longer have any Euros to talk about, Mark. Unfortunately, Sardegna was the only one. So I'm not going to match you here, but I'm going to riff off of Nick here and talk about A Gest of Robinhood by Fred Serval. Good man, Fred. And actually, Fred also runs his own YouTube channel, so you can look that up. And Fred's a wonderful dude overall. So I got to play this with Liz Davidson, so that's why I'm talking about it now. Nick reminded me that Liz was there. We had a pretty good time. We got to we got to chat per se and discuss games, and we were kind of going between Gest of Robinhood and another PAX game called PAX Penning that we're both interested in. So that said, we decided to crack open Gest of Robinhood, and then we set it up and we just started playing without really knowing the rules. So it was a unique experience. That said, Gest of Robinhood is also a coin-inspired game. In the same vein as Vajayanagara, it's in their I think it's Irregular Conflict series, the ICS. That said, they're very very much coin games, honestly. And this game is a two-player game where one side plays as the Sheriff of Nottingham, and the other side plays Robin of Locksley. So, as you could imagine, it's about Robin Hood. So the side of Robin Hood and his merry men, they're trying to basically hijack shipments from the sheriff of coin that they're stealing or confiscating, let's say, from the countryside from their population, and then trying to redistribute that coin. And then ultimately, you're basically fighting over order or justice. So you can probably guess who wants what, right? So Robin Hood wants justice, and the sheriff wants order. So it's a coin game. You have pieces that are in hiding that are trying to, do this like ransacking function and get this money, and then use that money to keep financing their campaign, and ultimately turn the the entire countryside against the sheriff and the king or the prince. So that said, I actually really enjoyed this game a lot more, I think, than Liz did. Liz had some issues with with the game, and I do agree with a lot of that criticism. I think that it's a very challenging game to pick up and give to a new player to coin and say, go play it, have a good time. That's probably not going to happen unless they know some very basic strategies beforehand. So keep that in mind. Read a little bit about the game, or just be okay with one side getting completely annihilated, and that's what happened in our game. So, but that said, I was Robin Hood, and it's really funny to steal from the rich and give to the poor. So that's all I have to say about Gest of Robinhood. Good design, Fred. Well done, and I'm excited to give it a try with my son. So I think he'll get a lot out of that as an intro coin game.
Well, Sobhi, you were saying you were a little jealous of not being part of the Vajayanagara game. I was a little jealous I didn't get to play Gest of Robinhood, because this game definitely has caught my attention for a while, and I think it's a really interesting direction that the coin-inspired games are taking by looking at these types of themes that are not historical per se, and are a little more on the fictional side of the spectrum. So curious if, and I know there's a space themed coin game that coming out soon or is out, and so I don't want to discredit my comment earlier that I appreciate coin games for the historical education you get for them, but also I do think to bring in new players to the hobby, even having themes that maybe are more appealing to certain people might help people get introduced to the hobby to begin with. Maybe not this one based on your comment, Sobhi, that it's not maybe a game for beginners, but definitely looked like a cool game.
I think it is if you allow if it's just one beginner out of the two, you give them the Robin Hood faction. That's
Okay.
probably like a reasonable, thing to do. Learn the game, get comfortable with the mechanisms if you're buying this, right? And you don't know the system. And then, when you set up a game, give the other player you're teaching it to the Robinhood faction. And I think they'll have a good time.
Great. Hey everyone, Future Nick here, jumping in to say the original recording of this episode lasted for over an hour and a half. So instead of having a very long episode 8 of the Talking Cardboard podcast, we decided that we would split it into 2 separate episodes. So with that said, this concludes episode 8 of the Late Night Talking Cardboard podcast. I want to thank you so much for listening, whether on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or on our YouTube channel. I also want to thank Sobhi and Mark for their time. I will thank them again at the end of the next episode too, but for the sake of this episode, I'm thanking them for their time. And please check out the Moguls Gamers podcast as well, and then of course check out all the other content that Talking Cardboard has, including our YouTube channel, our TikTok, our X, and then of course our podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for episode 9. Have a great day.